The pine needles beneath Ayana's feet made no sound as she moved through the pre-dawn darkness of the Georgia wilderness. Her father had taught her that, how to walk like wind, how to breathe like shadow. Skills passed down through generations of Cherokee hunters, now reduced to memories and whispers since President Jackson had signed their death warrant 7 years ago. The Indian Removal Act, they called it. As if you could remove a people from their bones, from their blood, from the very earth that had known their names for 1,000 years. She carried a woven basket against her hip, filled with herbs and roots she'd gathered in the hours before sunrise. Bloodroot for fever, wild ginger for Josiah's cough, sassafras for the tea that reminded him of his mother, though he never said so aloud. Words were dangerous things for a man like Josiah, a runaway slave who had dared to claim his own name, his own body, his own future. The cabin came into view through the morning mist that rose from the Chattahoochee River, a structure so hidden among the towering pines and thick undergrowth that even the deer sometimes startled when they passed it. Josiah had built it with his own hands, those same powerful hands that had once forged chains for other men's captivity. The irony was not lost on either of them. Smoke curled from the stone chimney he'd constructed, each rock carefully selected from the riverbed. Tell me in the comments which country you are from and what you thought of this story. And if this story made an impression on you, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any future stories. She could smell the cornmeal cakes he was cooking, could picture him standing over the fire, his broad shoulders curved slightly forward, the scars on his back a constellation of cruelty that she traced with her fingers on the nights when thunder made him remember. "You're late," he said when she pushed through the door, but his smile belied any concern. Josiah had a smile that could make flowers grow in winter, rare and precious and worth protecting at any cost. "The bloodroot was deeper in the forest this morning," Ayana replied, setting the basket on the rough-hewn table. "The earth is preparing for winter. Everything pulls inward." He crossed to her, his movements always slightly cautious, as if he expected the world to strike him at any moment. 6 feet of muscle and gentleness, wrapped in skin the color of rich mahogany. His hands, calloused from years at the forge, then months of building their hidden life, cupped her face with a tenderness that made her chest ache. "We should go deeper west," he said quietly. "Every day we stay, the risk grows." Ayana leaned into his touch, closing her eyes. "And every day we run, we lose another piece of ourselves. My people ran. They ran all the way to Oklahoma on the Trail of Tears, and still they died. Thousands of them. My mother, my sisters. Running didn't save them, Josiah. But staying killed them," he countered, his voice rough with emotion. "Baby, I can't lose you because I was too stubborn to keep moving." She opened her eyes and looked at him. Really looked at him. The fear that lived in the corners of his mouth, the love that burned in his dark eyes like lantern light in a storm. The impossible choice he made every morning, stay with her and risk capture or leave her and die inside. "Then we make this place a fortress," she said firmly. "We prepare. We survive. Together." He pulled her close, resting his chin on top of her head. She was small, barely 5 feet, with long black hair that she kept braided tight against her skull. But there was nothing delicate about Ayana. She had walked the Trail of Tears at 14, had buried her family in frozen ground, had survived on roots and rage, while white men watched her people die. "Together," he echoed, the word a prayer and a promise. They ate breakfast in comfortable silence, the kind of quiet that comes when two people have learned each other's rhythms, when words become optional. Through the single window, Ayana watched the forest come alive. Squirrels chattering in the oaks, a red-tailed hawk circling overhead, the endless green of Georgia wilderness that had become both sanctuary and prison. After breakfast, Josiah went to check his traps, while Ayana worked on treating a deer hide she'd been preparing for weeks. She used a mixture of brain and water, working it into the skin with patient, circular motions. Her grandmother had taught her this, back when the Cherokee Nation still existed as more than a ghost story, back when being Indian was a heritage instead of a crime. The work was meditative, allowing her mind to wander through the labyrinth of their situation. They'd been here for 8 months now, since that night Josiah had appeared at the edge of Cherokee territory, bleeding, desperate, more dead than alive. She'd found him collapsed near the river, his back torn open from a whipping, fever burning through him like wildfire. She should have let him die. That's what any sensible person would have done. Helping a runaway slave was dangerous enough. Falling in love with one was suicide. But Ayanna had stopped being sensible the day she'd watched her mother freeze to death on a forced march, the day she'd realized that the law was just another word for cruelty, dressed in patriotic colors. So she'd dragged him to her small shelter, had cleaned his wounds with water boiled over hidden fires, had fed him herbs and hope until the fever broke and he opened his eyes. And in those eyes she'd seen something she recognized, a refusal to accept the world's verdict on his worth. "My name is Josiah," he'd whispered, the words coming slow and thick. "Not boy, not property, Josiah." "Ayanna," she'd replied. "It means eternal blossom." "That's fitting," he'd said, managing the ghost of a smile. "You just brought me back from the dead." The sound of dogs barking in the distance jerked Ayanna from her memory. Her hands froze on the deer hide, every muscle in her body suddenly tense. Dogs, multiple dogs, and beneath their baying, the low rumble of men's voices. She moved to the window, peering through the gap in the wooden shutters. Nothing yet, but the sounds were getting closer, moving through the forest with purpose. These weren't random hunters passing through. These were men with a mission. Ayanna's heart began to pound, not with fear, but with a cold, crystalline clarity that she'd felt only once before, on the day she'd held her dying mother and realized that mercy was sometimes just another form of cowardice. She crossed to the corner of the cabin, where Josiah kept his tools, hammers and chisels and iron rods from his blacksmith days, and reached past them for the weapon that hung on 2 pegs behind. Her father's tomahawk. It was a beautiful thing, despite its deadly purpose. The handle was carved from hickory, worn smooth by generations of hands. The blade was steel, traded from white settlers 100 years ago, kept sharp through decades of use. Along the handle, her father had carved symbols, Cherokee syllabary that spelled out their family name, symbols of protection, a prayer to the spirits of forest and river. The weight of it in her hand felt like coming home. The door burst open and Josiah stumbled in, his eyes wide with panic. "Ayanna, they're coming. 5 men, maybe 6. Professional trackers by the look of them. Dogs trained to smell." He stopped, seeing the tomahawk in her hands. "No, no, baby. We run. We run right now." "Where?" she asked calmly. "They have dogs, Josiah. They have horses. They have the law on their side and murder in their hearts. We run, they catch us in the open. We stay, we choose our ground." "They'll kill you," he said desperately, crossing to her, his hands reaching for hers. "Or worse, you know what they do to Indian women who help runaways. You know." She did know. She'd heard the stories. Cherokee women raped and murdered, their bodies left in ditches, their deaths blamed on Indian savagery or simple bad luck. Justice was a concept that applied only to white men in Georgia. Everyone else was just property or pest, to be used or exterminated as convenience dictated. "Then we make them pay for the privilege," Ayanna said, meeting his eyes. "My people died running, Josiah, died begging, died trying to follow laws that were designed to kill us. I won't die that way. I won't." The dogs were closer now, their barking taking on the frenzied quality that meant they'd found a scent. Through the window, Ayanna could see movement in the trees, shadows that resolved into men on horseback, 5 of them, exactly as Josiah had said. They wore the rough clothes of frontier trackers, but their weapons were expensive, rifles that gleamed even in the filtered forest light. Pistols holstered at their hips, knives that hung from their belts like promises. "Hide," she told Josiah, her voice leaving no room for argument. "Under the floorboards, in the space you made. Hide now." "I won't leave you to—" "You will," she interrupted, "because if they take you, everything we've built dies. Everything we are dies. Your freedom dies. But if I stop them, if I buy us time, we survive. We endure. Trust me, my love. Trust me like I trusted you that first night." Something in her voice, some quality of absolute certainty, made him move. He kissed her once, hard and desperate, tasting like salt and fear and coffee. Then he dropped to the floor, pulling up the loose boards they'd prepared for exactly this moment, sliding into the darkness beneath. Ayanna replaced the boards, scattered a rug and some baskets over them, and moved to stand in the center of the cabin. The tomahawk hung loose in her right hand. Her left hand opened and closed, feeling the cool October air on her palm. The dogs reached the cabin first, throwing themselves against the door, their claws scraping wood. Then came the voices. "We know you're in there. Come out peaceful and nobody needs to get hurt." Ayanna almost laughed. As if peace was ever an option for people like her and Josiah, as if the men outside weren't planning exactly what kind of hurt to inflict the moment they had the chance. She moved to the door, her feet silent on the packed earth floor. Took a breath, let it out slow. Then she opened the door. 5 men sat on their horses, forming a semicircle around the cabin entrance. The leader, a man with a gray beard and cold eyes the color of river ice, smiled when he saw her. "Well now," he said, "ain't you a pretty little savage? You hiding a runaway in there, girl? Big buck, strong as an ox, answers to the name of property of Mason Turner of Savannah?" "I know no one by that description," Ayanna said calmly, her accent still carrying the melodic quality of Cherokee speech. "You're on Cherokee land. You should leave." The men laughed, a sound like rocks grinding together. "Cherokee land," the leader said, still smiling that terrible smile. "Darling, there ain't no Cherokee land no more. That all got bought and paid for. You're squatting on Georgia territory, which makes you a criminal. Now we can do this easy or we can do this hard. Your choice." He dismounted, his boots hitting the ground with heavy thuds. The other 4 followed suit, spreading out, surrounding her. The dogs strained at their leashes, teeth bared, trained to see brown skin and smell danger. Ayanna's fingers tightened on the tomahawk handle. Her father's voice echoed in her memory. "Wait for the moment when they think they've won. That's when they're most vulnerable." "Last chance, savage," the leader said, pulling a knife from his belt. "Tell us where the runaway is, and maybe we let you live. Maybe we even have some fun first, if you're nice about it." The other men laughed again. One of them was already unbuckling his belt. Ayanna looked at them, really looked at them. 5 men who saw her as nothing, who saw Josiah as property, who saw love as a crime and mercy as weakness. 5 men who represented everything that had destroyed her people, who embodied the casual cruelty of a system built on stolen land and stolen bodies. "Love is not a crime," she said quietly. Then she moved. Ayanna's tomahawk caught him in the throat, not the blade, but the spike on the back of the head, punching through his windpipe with the wet sound of metal entering meat. His eyes went wide with surprise, blood bubbling from his lips as he tried to scream. She yanked the weapon free, spinning away from his falling body, already tracking her next target. The dogs had gone silent, confused by the sudden violence. Their training said attack, but their instinct said flee. In that moment of canine hesitation, Ayanna had her advantage. The second man was drawing his pistol, his hand fumbling at the holster. Too slow. She covered the distance between them in 3 running steps, her body low and fast. The tomahawk came down in an overhead arc, catching him at the junction where neck met shoulder. The blade bit deep, cutting through flesh and muscle and bone until it lodged against his spine. His pistol fired wild, the shot going high into the pine canopy, sending birds screaming into the sky. She left the tomahawk embedded in his body, turning to face the remaining 3 with empty hands. They'd recovered from their shock now, were reaching for weapons, spreading out to flank her. The leader, the one with the grey beard and ice eyes, had his rifle up, the barrel swinging toward her. "You red bitch!" he shouted, his face purple with rage. "You're dead! You hear me? Dead!" Ayanna dove behind the corner of the cabin as his rifle cracked, the bullet chewing splinters from the doorframe where her head had been a heartbeat before. She could hear them shouting, coordinating, moving to surround the small structure. 3 men, all armed, all experienced killers who'd hunted human beings for profit. The smart thing would be to run, disappear into the forest, use her knowledge of the land to escape, let Josiah slip away when darkness fell. But Ayanna had learned long ago that survival sometimes required sacrificing smart for necessary. She pressed her back against the cabin wall, breathing hard, her mind racing through possibilities. The second man's body lay 10 feet away, her father's tomahawk still lodged in his ruined shoulder. If she could reach it. Footsteps crunched through pine needles, moving around the cabin's far side, closer, closer. She could hear the man's breathing, rapid and nervous. Good. Nervous men made mistakes. Ayanna dropped to her belly, crawling through the dirt and dead leaves with the silence her father had taught her. The footsteps paused, the man sensing something wrong, but not sure what. She slithered forward, making herself small, making herself invisible, until she could see his boots, expensive leather, polished to a shine that seemed obscene in the wilderness. She rolled, coming up fast, her hand closing on a fist-sized rock. His eyes widened as she materialized from the ground like a spirit. The rock caught him in the temple with a crack like breaking ice. He stumbled backward, blood streaming from his hairline, his rifle dropping from nerveless fingers. Ayanna was on him before he could recover, her hands finding his own knife in its sheath. She drove it up under his ribs, angling toward the heart, putting her whole body weight behind the thrust. His breath left him in a hot rush against her face, whiskey and tobacco, and the copper tang of blood. His hands pawed weakly at her arms as she held the blade inside him, counting seconds, waiting for the light to leave his eyes. 3, she whispered as he slumped to the ground. A bullet whined past her ear, so close she felt the heat of its passage. She threw herself flat, rolling behind the dead man's body, as more shots tore through the air where she'd been standing. The body jerked with impacts, meat and blood spraying. They were shooting at their own companion's corpse, too panicked to care, too desperate to be accurate. During the pause as they reloaded, Ayanna scrambled toward the second man's body, her hands closing on the tomahawk's handle. It came free with a sucking sound that would haunt quieter moments. The weight of it centered her, transformed her fear into something sharp and focused. 2 left, the leader and 1 other. "Spread out!" the grey-bearded man was shouting. "Circle around! She's just 1 squaw. We've killed dozens of her kind. Move!" But his voice carried an edge of hysteria now. Whatever they'd expected from this simple slave-catching mission, it wasn't a Cherokee woman who fought like a demon, who killed with the efficiency of a trained warrior. Fear was contagious, and Ayanna could hear it spreading between the 2 survivors like fever. She moved through the forest that surrounded the cabin, using every tree and bush for cover, her feet finding purchase on ground she'd walked 1,000 times. This was her territory now, bought with 8 months of learning every deer trail, every hidden hollow, every place where the earth whispered its secrets. The 4th man appeared through the trees, his rifle sweeping back and forth, his eyes white-rimmed with terror. He was young, maybe 20, with a sparse beard and acne scars on his cheeks. Someone's son, someone's brother, someone who'd chosen to hunt human beings for money. Ayanna felt no pity. She dropped from an oak branch above him, the tomahawk leading. The blade caught him across the side of the head, the impact sending a jolt up her arms. He went down hard, his rifle discharging into the dirt. She landed on top of him, driving her knee into his chest, pinning him. His hands came up to protect his face. Too little and too late. The tomahawk rose and fell, rose and fell, rose and fell. When she stood, her arms were painted red to the elbows. The young man's face was gone, replaced by something that looked